Good morning. Welcome to our assembly on the International Space Station by 8H. Today we're going to tell you all about the history of the space station, about the astronauts that have been travelling there, about how the astronauts get there, about the things that they do when they're on the space station, and also we'll be telling you how to find the space station yourself. You can use special apps on a mobile phone or other devices, and you can actually see the space station going over in the night sky. So hopefully with the good weather and the clear skies, you'll have a chance to get out to see it. Okay, I'll hand over to 8H. See you after.
The International Space Station, or ISS, is the largest man-made object in space. It took many years to become a reality. Originally, it was going to be called Space Station Freedom, before being changed to an International Space Station once other countries in America came on board with the idea. There are almost always 6 astronauts on board, and they rotate about every 6 months, so that no one is in space for way too long. The actual space station is about the size of a football pitch, and it travels around the world in around 19 minutes. And this circulates around the Earth around 19 times in a day.
The ISS was built and has made it possible for people to have an ongoing presence in space. Human beings have been living in space every day since the first crew arrived. The space station's laboratories allow crew members to do research that could not be done anywhere else. This scientific research benefits people on Earth. Space research is even used in everyday life. The results are products called spin-offs. Scientists also study what happens to the body when people live in a microgravity for a long time. NASA and its partners have learned how to keep a spacecraft working well. All of these lessons will be important for future space exploration. NASA currently is working on a plan to explore other worlds. The space station is one of the first steps. NASA will use lessons learned on the space station to prepare human missions that reach further into space than ever before. Some pre-hand concepts of the ISS was called Freedom. NASA plans called for the station, which was later dubbed Space Station Freedom, to function as an orbiting repair shop for satellites and an assembly point for spacecraft, an observation post for astronomers, a microgravity laboratory for scientists, and a microgravity factory for companies. The first ISS model was launched by a Proton rocket on the 20th November 1998. The STS-88 space shuttle mission followed 2 weeks after Zarya was launched, bringing Unity, the first of 3 nude models, and connecting it to Zarya. This bare 2 module core of the ISS remained uncrewed for the next 1.5 years, until in July 2000, the Russian module Zvezda was launched by a Proton rocket, allowing a maximum crew of 2 astronauts or cosmonauts to be on the ISS permanently.
Orbit. It lies in the thermosphere. It is a polar orbit which is approximately 220 miles above the Earth, travelling at an average speed of 17,227 miles per hour. The ISS makes multiple orbits around the Earth every day. Not only do astronauts live there, experiments are done up there as well. It is also an artificial satellite. How can you see it? Thanks to modern technology, we can use lots of apps ranging from the internet to on our phones. Some examples of trackers are the ISS tracker and also Spot the Station from NASA. You can even get emails or alerts if the ISS is passing above you. It also recommends good sites for going to see it. It appears as a bright star from viewpoints shown at the back of my slide. Here is the example of the Spot the Station tracker. As you can see, it recommends lots of viewpoints that you can see the ISS from.
The start of construction of the ISS up to 2000 by Aaron Patel. It all started in 1984 when NASA announced a program called Space Station Freedom. There were many designs on what it should look like, but then funding was cut by US Congress until 1993, when many other countries were brought on board. They renamed it the ISS. 5 years later, in 1999, construction began in space. The timeline of events up to 2000. November 1998, the Russian Zarya module was the first module launched. It is a functional cargo block. December 1998, the American Unity Node 1 module joined the Zarya module. 2 pressurized mating adapters, PMA-1 and PMA-2, were launched to connect the Zarya and Node 1 together. July 2000, the Russian Zvezda service module joined the party. October 2000, the American Z1 truss was the next one up. It holds equipment for the station, but isn't part of the main truss. It is only temporary at this point in the process. PMA-3 was also added to the bottom side of Unity Node 1 to connect later modules to it. November 2000, the American P6 was mounted to the Z1 truss temporarily. This includes the first solar array wings. This provides much needed power to the growing station. Radiator panels were added to remove excess heat from the station. Thank you for listening to my part of the presentation. I will now hand you over to Kevin, who will discuss the rest of components added from 2001 to the finished product.
ISS today. Modules. There are 16 different modules in the ISS, with each one belonging to different countries over the world. The 16 different countries are Canada, Japan, Russia, the US, and the 11 countries which are part of the European Space Agency, who are Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. How power is supplied. There is about 1.367 kilowatts per square meter. The enormous solar panels supply all the power needed for the ISS. What the ISS is for. The ISS is conducting experiments in space which are impossible to do on Earth. The ISS is now 22 years old, and the current funding will end in 2025.
Living in the International Space Station may seem awesome, but after I'm done talking, it may seem more like a bad camping trip. Or you may still think it sounds amazing. Here are a few things about living in the International Space Station. They sleep in beds that act more like straps to hold them down, otherwise they would float around aimlessly and potentially hit something. Food is stored in bags to keep it together. The food must be nutritious as not to waste space. Fizzy drinks aren't a very good idea. Anything that causes burping due to microgravity can cause vomiting. There is also an observatory where you can look down on the planet. So far there has been a total of 109 people on the station, and there's always someone on board. The ship is set at a temperature of 18 to 26 degrees. This is hard though, because the Earth's shadow makes it colder than the average night time, and in the daytime the direct sunlight means it gets very hot and the station needs to be cooled. In microgravity it takes no effort to stand up, meaning when you're in space what happens to your body is like the opposite of what happens to a tree in a field alone. It grows stronger so it doesn't get blown over. But in a forest where all the trees break up the wind and support each other, other trees can be straighter and weaker because they don't need to be as strong. In space this happens to your bones and muscles unless you do a lot of exercise, so they have to spend a lot of time doing it. Thanks for listening. I hope you learned something. Cheerio!
Experiments in space. At any given time on board the space station, a large selection of different experiments are underway. The primary fields of these are human research, space medicine, life sciences, physical sciences, astronomy, and meteorology. Here are a few examples. In biology, cell and tissue growth can be dramatically different to those on Earth. Various experiments have tested the nature of cells, tissues, and small organisms on orbit as a way to increase our understanding of biological processes in microgravity. Our presence of the space station in low Earth orbit provides an advantage for collecting Earth and space science data. Things such as glaciers, agricultural fields, cities, and coral reefs taken from the ISS can be used as collective data. Space exploration means that people in space can test human health issues in a completely different environment. This means that there is an ongoing search to cure diseases in space. Finally, and most importantly, the space station is the only place to study the long-term physical effects in an absence of gravity, which is key to expanding our understanding of physical sciences.
The Space Shuttle. It was used for the transportation of modules during constructions. It has a large belly used for storage of modules and components. There were 6 shuttles used to go to the ISS. Those 6 were Atlantis, Endeavour, Discovery, Enterprise, Columbia, and Challenger. Atlantis completed the shuttle program in July of 2011. The shuttles were stopped because there was no need to transport more components, and it was also very expensive to run.
Proton and Soyuz rockets. After the Space Shuttle program was discontinued by America, the space station relied on Russia to get people and supplies to the space station, and the only option for this was 2 rockets, a Proton rocket and Soyuz rocket. The Proton rocket is the rocket that brings modules to the ISS, and it also brings probes to Mars and Moon. The Proton rocket is 53 meters tall, and the first one was launched in 1965. Since then, Russia have only upgraded the rocket to what it is today. The first Soyuz rocket was launched on the 23rd of April 1967, but the flight didn't go well. There was one pilot on board, Vladimir Komarov, but he was the first death by space travel, as the parachute module failed to unfurl after re-entry into our atmosphere. The Soyuz rocket is the one that takes people up to the International Space Station and was manufactured in Samara. The people with English roots that have got there from this rocket are Tim Peake and English-born Canadian Chris Hadfield.
Tim Peake is an astronaut who spent over 300 hours doing operations in space, which is 125 days. He is currently 48 years old and was born on the 7th of April 1972. His mission was called the Principia, and on 15th of December 2015 he launched off the planet and spent 6 months on the International Space Station. Fun fact: before he was an astronaut, he was a pilot and spent 18 years of military service. His achievements. Number 1. He became the first British astronaut to visit the International Space Station. 2. He conducted over 250 scientific experiments for the ESA and international partners during his mission. 3. He ran the London Marathon on a treadmill on the space station. His project uses space to increase the engagement of primary school children with science, numeracy, and literacy to increase their enjoyment and engagement in all lessons, and was a very exciting time for people, especially children around the world. He has also orbited the Earth 2,720 times. Tim then finished his 186-day Principia mission working on the International Space Station when he landed back on Earth in July the 18th, 2016 in Kazakhstan.
The founder of SpaceX is Elon Musk. He created it to try and reduce space exploration costs and eventually send people to Mars. SpaceX is a private company, so it isn't run by the government, and was the first private company to ship cargo to the International Space Station. Recently, SpaceX launched a rocket to space with 2 NASA astronauts. It was the first launch of NASA astronauts from the United States since the retirement of the space shuttles.
In the years since, NASA has paid Russia's space program to transport its astronauts to the space station. And with this success, NASA, to its own delight, has begun ceding this task to SpaceX and other companies. And it opens new possibilities for entrepreneurs looking to make money off the planet. In the future, Elon Musk plans to colonize Mars and send people to Mars.
In February 2018, the White House indicated that NASA would cease to receive government funding for the ISS by 2025. If this is enforced, billions of dollars will need to come from private companies, and other countries benefiting from the ISS will need to make a much greater contribution to the cost. Although the ISS is labeled as an international project, in reality, most of the costs of the building and operating it have been borne by the American taxpayer. Each year, it remains in orbit. NASA allocates roughly half of its total human spaceflight budget to ISS operations, an expenditure that limits its ability to fund development of manned spacecraft to visit the moon and other destinations beyond low Earth orbit. No one really knows what the future holds for ISS, but we hope that the White House will not enforce the stop of funding and the space station will continue to run.
Okay, thank you very much, boys. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you've learned a few new facts about the space station and about how it operates, and maybe you've been inspired to go outside and look for it yourself. The ISS tracker is one of the applications that I use to see it, so have a look around and you'll find lots of them. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that and see you again soon. Bye-bye.